There is a moment in the coming of age of every Dalish elf when someone who loves them holds a needle to their face and begins to write. The ritual is performed in silence. Cries of pain are taken as signs of weakness, not because the Dalish are cruel, but because the Dalish have survived things that would break most people, and they pass that survival on through ceremony. The ink is pressed into the skin in patterns that have been handed down for generations, designs that the clans carry the way other peoples carry prayers. Each line honors one of the gods. Each line says, "I belong to something older than myself. I belong to a story that was not finished." The young elf sits very still. They have memorized the stories about the god whose mark they will wear. They know the myths and the names, the battles and the blessings, the way the god once moved through a world that still sang with magic. They have been told their whole lives that this mark is a sacred thing, that it will carry them into adulthood with the protection of someone holy. They do not know what it actually is. Take a slow breath. There is no hurry here. We have the whole night. There is something sitting at the center of this story that I want to hold until we have earned it. Something about what those marks mean, and what they meant once, and what the people who made them were actually doing when they pressed them into someone else's skin. When we reach it, it will change what everything before it meant, not add to it, change it. What the Dalish carry on their faces is the oldest secret in the world of Dragon Age. And before this story ends, you will know what it is, and you will not be able to unsee it. By the time we reach the close, something in the way you understand power, who takes it, how they keep it, and what they call it to make it seem inevitable, will be different. You have to understand what the Dalish are before you can understand what the truth about their gods means to them. The Dalish are wanderers. They move across the face of Thedas in small clans, living in painted wagons pulled by sacred white deer, preserving fragments of a language and a culture and a mythology that was systematically destroyed over thousands of years. They lost their homeland. They lost their immortality. They lost most of their history. What remains is kept in stories told around fires, in rituals passed from keeper to apprentice, in tattoos written on the faces of their children. They are the keepers of something that no longer exists, trying to keep it from disappearing entirely. And that act of preservation is one of the most human things in the world. This refusal to let what was beautiful simply be gone. The gods they remember are worthy of the devotion given to them in the stories they tell. Elgar'nan the All-Father, god of the sun and vengeance, who cast down the sky when it burned the earth and was calmed by Mythal's wisdom, Mythal the Turn. Protector, goddess of motherhood and justice, who adjudicated disputes between the other gods and shielded the people from those who would harm them. Andruil the Huntress, who prowled the deep places of the world. Veilguard, the mother of Halar, navigator and creator, who loved her people. Falon Din, the friend of the dead, who guided souls through what came after. Dirtaman, the keeper of secrets, twin brother of Falon Din. Silays, the hearthkeeper. June, the god of the hunt. Beautiful names. Old names. Names that the elves carried through centuries of diaspora, like embers cupped in both hands, trying not to let them go out. The Dalish call these beings the creators. They call them gods. They trace their marks onto their faces and call it love. Something is wrong with the story, though. Has been wrong for a long time, buried beneath the myth and the reverence and the centuries of loss that made the truth impossible to reach. It takes a particular kind of tragedy to look directly at, the thing that gave your people meaning, and say, this is not what we thought it was. The crack appears when you ask the question no one wanted to ask. What do we actually know about who the Evanuris were? Not what the myths say, not what the Dalish teach their children. What actually happened in Elvhenan in the ancient world, before the cities fell and the people were scattered and the names of the gods became the only thing anyone could still read? There is a man who remembers, and what he remembers will change every name on that list. He describes them the way someone describes a wound they have been carrying for too long. Solus, the wandering apostate mage who appears without ceremony at the beginning of Dragon Age. Inquisition, introducing himself with a kind of weary politeness, as though he has been awake for longer than anyone should be, is the closest thing this world has to a first-hand witness. Because Solus is Fenharel, the dread wolf, the trickster god, who according to Dalish legend, sealed the elven gods away in the Fade at the end of the world's golden age. He was there. He was inside it. He watched it happen from within, and what he says about it is not reverent. He says the Evanuris were not gods. They were never gods, not in any sense that word is usually meant. They had no divine origin. They did not create the world. They were not eternal beings who loved the people from beyond the boundaries of mortality. They were, at their core, something far simpler and far more recognizable. They were very powerful people who decided that power was the same thing as divinity, and that anyone who believed otherwise could be made to change their mind. The memories Solus leaves behind in Dragon Age. The Veilguard. Fragments of the past that the player's character finds scattered through the crossroads confirm how this happened. They rose gradually, first respected, then powerful, then positioned above the people in ways that became harder and harder to question, until the distance between them and everyone else was so vast that crossing it had become unthinkable. The step from warlord to elder to king to god took time. No one moment where the slide became irreversible, just the slow accumulation of a decision made every morning not to step back down. Elgar'nan was the one who made it permanent. After the Great War, when the expectation was that the most powerful among the elves would return what they had taken and rejoin the people as equals, he refused. He said the people needed him. He said they required strong leadership, stern guidance, the kind of protection his power could offer in a still dangerous world. The others followed his example, each of them finding their own language for the same decision. We will not step down. We will not return what we have taken. Solus disagreed. He had joined the physical world at Mythal's invitation, and what he saw in this refusal was not leadership. It was the first step on a path he recognized, the path where power stops justifying itself and simply begins to demand. He wrote letters. He made arguments. He told Elgar'nan that dominating the minds of his subjects was unnecessary when their bodies were already shackled and his authority was accepted by most. Elgar'nan had his servants send a polite dismissal. He did not reply himself. But before we can understand what the Evanuris became, we have to understand something the Dalish myths never mention, something Dragon Age. The Veilguard reveals for the first time, buried in the memories Solus left behind. Something about where the Evanuris actually came from, and it is darker than anything the legends prepared for. The Evanuris were originally spirits, not beings who had always had bodies, not creatures born of flesh and blood and the passage of years. Creatures of the Fade, that luminous, living dreamscape that exists alongside the physical world of Thedas, where the emotions and desires and fears of living things take on shape and form and voice. The Fade is full of spirits, beings who embody concepts the way a river embodies motion. A spirit of compassion is compassion made conscious. A spirit of wisdom knows things the way deep water knows cold. The Evanuris were spirits like this once. Powerful ones, ancient ones. And then, at some point in the deep history of the world, they decided they wanted bodies. Delirium is the blood of the Titans, great primordial beings of stone and metal who dwelled beneath the surface of Thedas, shaping the world from within. Delirium runs through them the way blood runs through living things, carrying their dreams, their consciousness, whatever it is that makes something truly alive. The dwarves came from the Titans. They are, in some essential way, the children of the stone. The Evanuris stole the Titans' blood to build themselves. They pulled raw lyrium from living beings and shaped it into flesh. They made themselves elves. The first elves, the origin of the entire people, out of material that was not theirs to take. And the Titans felt it. The violation moved through the stone like a wound, and the Titans rose against them, and a war began that would cost both sides more than anyone could have anticipated. Think about what that means. The people exist because a group of spirits decided they wanted to be corporeal, and the price of that decision was paid not by them, but by everything that came after. The war went back and forth, long, brutal. And eventually Mythal came to solace. Still, at that point, a spirit of wisdom who had taken flesh at Mythal's own request, because she had told him she needed his clarity, that she needed someone who would tell her the truth. And she asked him to do something terrible. She asked him to craft a dagger out of pure lyrium. He made it. He warned her about what it would do. He said the cost of this will be felt for longer than we can see. Mythal told him it was the only way. The dagger was used in a ritual that severed the Titans from their dreams, made them tranquil. And that word will land differently if you have followed Dragon Age for long, because tranquil is what the circles do to mages the Templars decide are too dangerous to leave whole. The tranquil are calm, passive, emptied, still alive, but everything that made them themselves, their inner life, their connection to the Fade, their sense of who they were, has been cut away. Solus did that to the Titans. An entire race of primordial beings severed from their own consciousness at one stroke. The severed dreams of the Titans were imprisoned in the Fade. And then they mutated. Out of anger, out of fear, out of the disorientation of something living that has been separated from everything it knew. They became corrupt. They became something that would haunt Thedas for thousands of years after. The Blight is the severed dreams of Titans, the Grey Wardens, the 5 catastrophes that have devastated civilizations, the dark spawn pouring from the deep places of the world, the archdemons, every horror that has defined the shape of suffering in this world. All of it traces back to that dagger, that moment, that conversation where Solus said, "This is awful," and Mythal said, "It is the only way." The gods who would later enslave the people first helped sever the consciousness of an entire ancient race to win a war for territory. There is no good beginning to this story, only earlier crimes. After the Titan War, the Evanuris were victorious. The threat was defeated. The people were safe. And then the Evanuris proclaimed themselves gods. What followed was called Elvhenan, meaning place of our people. And by any measure, it was an extraordinary civilization. The elves were immortal. Their cities were crystalline, floating structures threaded through with magic, the way a living body is threaded with nerves. The Fade was not separate from daily life. It was present, accessible, woven into everything the way sunlight is woven into a morning. Magic was not a rare gift or a dangerous aberration. It was as natural as breathing. 1,000 years of this, maybe more. The histories are unclear on duration because the people who built them were not keeping the kind of records that survive catastrophe. What survives? In inscriptions, in the ruins, in the fragments Solus's memories make visible in the Veilguard, tells a different story than the Dalish myths. Elgar'nan's monument, recorded in the ancient shattered library, was carved by what the inscription describes as a thousand slaves in a single afternoon. His statue had narrowed eyes and a snarling mouth. Not the posture of a being who loved the people. The posture of a being who wanted to be feared by them. The Evanuris divided the people between themselves. Each god had a domain, and in that domain, the other elves were not citizens. They were property. The most powerful among the Evanuris took the most. Elves who had not achieved the heights of magical power, who had not become so formidable that they could claim a place among the great, were sorted and marked and assigned. This is the world that the Dalish myths remember as golden. It was golden. For the Evanuris, for the elves at the very top, the light was real, the magic was real, the beauty was real. And underneath it, bound by marks cut into their own skin, were the people who built it. There is something almost unbearably recognizable about this. The architecture of it, the way those at the top believe, sometimes genuinely believe, that what they have created is good, is glorious, is worth the cost being paid by people they have decided not to fully see. The Evanuris were not stupid. They were not even, all of them, consciously cruel. Solus describes Mythal as the best of them, someone who genuinely cared for her, people who pushed back against the worst of what the others did, who was a real voice of reason and justice inside a system of absolute power. But even Mythal participated. The Well of Sorrows, the repository of knowledge left behind by Mythal's ancient priests, reveals that even her followers wore her Valasleen. Even she had her slaves. Not a leader who had made a mistake. Not a god who had lost their way. A civilization that had decided, at a certain point, that some people existed to serve others, and built an entire architecture of myth and ceremony and beauty around making that decision invisible. The most dangerous thing about a golden age is how real the gold is. The first among the gods to find the blight as a weapon was Andruil. The huntress, in the Dalish myths, is a figure of wild and dangerous beauty, a goddess who stalked prey through impossible places, who walked the void and came back changed. The Codex entry attributed to her in Dragon Age, Inquisition says exactly this, that each time she entered the void to hunt, Andruil suffered longer and longer periods of madness on her return. The other gods feared her. Eventually, Mythal intervened. Some accounts say Mythal turned into a dragon to do it, according to lore found in Dragon Age, the Veilguard, and peace returned. What the myth does not say is why Andruil was so dangerous. The armor she forged from the creatures she hunted in the void was infused with the blight, the taint that has poisoned Thedas through 5 separate catastrophes, each one killing thousands. Andruil found it, and she wore it, and for a time she used the power it gave her to terrorize the other gods. Mythal stopped her, but no one destroyed the knowledge. The Evanuris remembered what the blight could do, and as Solus's rebellion grew, as the number of elves willing to fight back against their enslaved existence increased, as the old order began to crack under the pressure of people who had decided they were worth more than what they had been told they were worth, the Evanuris became desperate. Desperate people with absolute power do not become cautious. They reach for whatever is most destructive. The blight became a weapon of war. The very corruption the gods had been responsible for creating, the severed dreams of the Titans, the suffering that would eventually spill from the Black City into 5 generations of catastrophe, weaponized against their own people, used during Solus's rebellion, used against the Forgotten Ones, the rival faction of gods who had their own cruelties and their own ambitions, used against anyone who threatened the order they had built. Meanwhile, somewhere in Elgar'nan's underground laboratory, something else was happening. The bas-reliefs along the corridors leading to her lab, found by Grey Wardens centuries later, documented in the story Horror of Hormak, show hundreds of elves being taken up the mountain as prisoners. Inside the chamber, the Hala are depicted not as the graceful sacred deer the Dalish love, but as monstrous insectile things. The laboratory itself holds a brine pool at its center, where different living beings were combined into new creatures. Not out of curiosity, out of appetite. She was, by every account the lore preserves, formidably intelligent. Solas described her as brilliant, ambitious, and entirely unconstrained by any form of morality. She had earned her place among the Evanuris by making monsters for Andrul to hunt. And when those monsters began to prey on elves instead of serving as prey themselves, she destroyed them without hesitation. Not out of remorse, because she had something to gain from doing so. The blight to her was raw potential, a tool of creation, freed from the inconvenient question of whether the things being created could feel what was being done to them. This is the mother of the Hala. This is the god whose sacred mark the Dalish trace onto their children's faces to honor navigation and creation and the love of the people. Hold on to that thought, because the next thing this story has to tell you will change what that sentence just meant. They honor the elven gods, says the elf who has worn the marks her whole life. No, Solas says, they are slave markings, or at least they were, in the time of ancient Arlathan. This is a scene from Dragon Age, Inquisition, a quiet conversation in a secluded cove, the veil thin and tingling on the skin, where one of the oldest secrets in the world is said plainly to someone who had built part of their identity around not knowing it. Each Valaslin design represents one of the Evanuris. Each design, pressed into the face of an elven slave, told anyone who looked at them, this person is owned by this god. The Elgar'nan design meant you belonged to Elgar'nan. The Veilguard design meant you were property of Veilguard. The Mythal design, those flowing wings and roots that the Dalish have worn for generations as an expression of love and devotion, meant Mythal's servants were marked with her claim. After Arlathan fell, the Dalish forgot what the marks had meant. They kept the designs. They passed them down. They made them holy in the way that people make holy the things they cannot bear to lose, which is also the way people sometimes make holy the things that hurt them without knowing the hurt is there. The ritual became a coming-of-age ceremony, a sign of belonging to the people, an act of love. The marks went from prison to prayer, and no one was left to know the difference. Every Dalish elf who has ever sat still in the firelight, while someone they loved pressed ink into their skin, every one of them was unknowingly wearing the evidence of what the gods actually were. Every ceremony of devotion was simultaneously a testament to the cruelty visited upon the very ancestors being honored. The people survived. They carried the culture forward, and the mark they chose to carry, out of love, out of survival, out of the refusal to let everything disappear, was the mark that had been pressed into someone else's skin against their will. Not a coincidence, a haunting. This is what the in-game dialogue of Dragon Age, Inquisition confirms, and what the ruins and codex entries of the Veilguard expand. The Evanuris ran a slave civilization. They branded their slaves, and the religion that grew from the ruins of that civilization preserved the brands as sacred symbols. Solas, who had removed the Valaslin from the faces of slaves he freed during his rebellion, offered to remove it from the Inquisitor's face the same way. The Dalish phrase he spoke when he did it, Ar Lasamara Revas, means, "You are free." the word he had said, 1,000 years before, to people whose names no history kept. There was one among the Evanuris who tried to be something different. Mythal is complicated in the way that powerful people who do some good within corrupt systems are always complicated. Not innocent. She participated. She had her own slaves. She made her own compromises. But inside the structure of the Evanuris, she was the one who argued for mercy, the one Solus trusted, the one who still had enough of her original nature, that spirit of benevolence who had once asked Solus to join her in the world because she needed his wisdom, needed someone who would tell her the truth, to be moved by the suffering of the people. She was the one who went to the other Evanuris at Solus's urging and told them to stop using the blight. She stood in the room with the most powerful and most ruthless beings in the world and said, "This has to end." The Evanuris killed her with Solus's own dagger, the same lyrium dagger he had forged at her request to win the Titan War, the instrument of their first great victory together, the blade made possible by Solus's trust in Mythal's. Judgment had been stolen by Elgar'nan, and when Mythal confronted the assembled Evanuris, they used it on her, the weapon that made the blight, the weapon Solus built because he loved her. The same weapon. She did not die completely. A fragment of Mythal endured, scattered into the world, living for centuries in various vessels, eventually finding her way into Flemeth, eventually into Morrigan, carrying that ancient grief forward across millennia. But the Mythal who had argued for mercy inside the court of the Evanuris was gone. The best of them was gone. And what remained was the gods in their fullness, blight-armed and absolute, with no one left to push back. Solus found out. He recovered his dagger from Elgar'nan. He found a fragment of Mythal inside it, hidden there, surviving in the only refuge available. And then he built the Veil. The Veil is the barrier between the physical world and the Fade that every mage in Dragon Age strains against. The reason magic is dangerous rather than natural, the reason the elves are mortal rather than eternal, the wall that has separated the world from half of itself for thousands of years. Solus built it to imprison the Evanuris, tying the Veil to their lives and blood in the lyrium dagger. He sealed all 8 of them into the Fade, alongside the blight he had banished to the Black City. He did not intend for what happened next. He did not intend for the Veil to strip the elves of their immortality, their connection to the Fade, their magic. He did not intend for Elvhenan to fall, for the Tevinter Imperium to rise on the ruins, for the people to spend the next several thousand years as scattered wanderers carrying the fragments of a culture they could no longer fully read. He knew it might. He built it anyway. Because Mythal was dead, and he had written letters that came back through servants and watched the blight weaponized against the people who were supposed to be protected by their gods. And there was nothing left to try. The punishment for what the Evanuris had done fell on everyone, not just on the Evanuris, on all of Elvhenan, on every elf who would ever live after that moment. Every Dalish elf now wandering Thedas without a homeland is carrying, among other things, the consequence of that decision. That last resort, that locked door, that morning Solus built the Veil because he had run out of other choices. This is not a story with a clean ending. It is only a story with a before and an after, and the enormity of the distance between them. The Evanuris had something in common, in the end, with every other empire built on the belief that some people were worth less than others. They could not make people stop caring. The Dalish clans who wander Thedas do not know the full truth about the Valislin. They do not know what Ghilan Nayan's laboratory looked like, or what Elgar'nan's monument was built on, or what the Golden Age actually meant for the elves who lived underneath it. They know what was passed down, fragments of a myth assembled over centuries by people trying to preserve something precious from vanishing entirely. They got things wrong. Of course they did. They were working without sources, without access to the ancient records, without the ability to read their own language at full comprehension. They made the gods into something worthy of the love they needed to give them, because that is what people do when they love something that cannot love them back in the way they need. But they kept going. They kept the language alive, or fragments of it. They kept the ceremonies. They kept the stories. They kept moving across a world that did not particularly want them, protecting what they could of who they were. There is something in this that the Evanuris could not have predicted and would not have cared about if they had. The people outlasted them. The empire built on slave labor and divine pretension is gone. The civilization that proclaimed itself eternal and golden is dust. And somewhere in a painted wagon pulled by a white deer, a keeper is still tracing the old patterns onto young skin, still saying the old names, still performing an act of love in a language learned from people who were not allowed to be free. The gods who made the marks are imprisoned. The marks are still here, transformed into something the gods never intended and never deserved. But what does it mean to know this now? What does a Dalish elf do with it? The scene is in Dragon Age. Inquisition. A quiet cove. The veil thin, the air tingling. Solus tells the Inquisitor the truth about the Valislin. He says the words plainly, without drama, because the truth, after long enough, stops requiring performance. He offers to remove the marks. The Dalish phrase he uses is Ar lasa mara revas. You are free. The Inquisitor has a choice. She can let him remove it. She can refuse. If she keeps it, what she is saying, what she is choosing, is this. I know what this was. And I have made it mean something else. Whatever the gods intended when they put this mark on my ancestors' faces, that intention is not what it carries now. Now it carries me, my clan, my people, everything we kept alive in the dark. If she removes it, what she is saying is this: now that I know, I cannot wear the wound as though it were a crown. The mark belongs to history. I will go without it. Both choices are real. Neither one resolves anything. This is the revelation this story has been building toward. Not the fact about the marks, but what it asks of the person who learns it. The truth does not resolve things. It only changes what has to be carried and how. And what the Evanuris left behind is not a legacy of gods. It is the legacy of what happens when people with extraordinary power decide that power is the same thing as righteousness. That strength is the same thing as deserving. That the ability to dominate is the same thing as the right to. They built a civilization on that logic. They enslaved their own people to sustain it. They weaponized a world-ending corruption to protect it. They killed the one among them who tried to suggest something different might be possible. And then they were sealed away. And the world had to figure out how to exist in the aftermath of them. Not a villain, a system. Not a fall from grace. A slow, willful decision, made every day, never to look down at the people below. The Dalish figured out how to exist in that aftermath. Not with full knowledge of what they were doing, not perfectly, but with something that looks, from this distance, a great deal like grace. They took the marks of ownership and made them marks of belonging. They took the names of slavers and made them names of gods. They took a mythology built to justify cruelty and rebuilt it around justice and protection and love. They did not know that was what they were doing. They were just trying to survive and to pass something forward, and to make the thing they were carrying worth the weight. The story worth telling is not the Evanuris. The story worth telling is the people who outlasted them, who were enslaved and forgotten and remembered wrong and kept going anyway, who turned a wound into something they could bear to wear, who sat still in firelight, generation after generation, and let someone who loved them write on their faces. If this story found you tonight, and it was worth staying awake for, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It keeps this channel alive, and it makes sure more of these stories get told. There is a moment in the coming of age of every Dalish elf when someone who loves them holds a needle to their face and begins to write. See it again. The same firelight, the same silence, the same patterns that have been handed down for longer than anyone left alive can remember. The young elf sits very still. And now you know what is written on them, what it meant the first time it was ever cut into someone's skin, what it costs to carry the marks of the people who hurt you and make them mean something else entirely, make them mean love, make them mean, I am still here, we are still here, you could not make us disappear. The keeper finishes the last line, sets the needle down, looks at what has been made. The gods who demanded this are gone, locked into the dark where they can do no more harm. The people who were meant to be forgotten are still here, still marking their children with the old designs, still saying the old names, not in service of those who first wrote them, in memory of everyone who survived them. Let the rest go now, the monuments and the laboratories, the dagger and the dagger's cost, the beautiful, impossible empire built on the labor of people. The histories did not think to name. Let it drift. What survives does not always survive because it was protected. Sometimes it survives because enough people refused, quietly and stubbornly, to let it be gone. Rest now.